Well, joining us for our weekly review of the news are Peter Collins, who's the Managing Director of Barton Deakin and a former New South Wales Liberal opposition leader, and John Dickson from the Centre for Public Christianity. Welcome to you both, and thanks very much for coming in this morning. I thought we'd start off with religion and advertising. Now, a Muslim group called My Peace has put up billboards with slogans like "Jesus is a prophet of Islam" in Sydney, and apparently they're planning to extend the campaign and they're calling for donations. One bishop has called the billboards offensive and provocative, and we're seeing it there. Another has said it's complete nonsense to call Jesus a prophet of Islam. Well, I'll start with the more religious of the two of you, if that's correct. John Dickson, is it a provocation?
No, I think it's fantastic. I love there being more discussion about these things. In fact, I got to interview Dia Muhammad, who's the guy behind the Islamic posters, and quizzed him about why they're doing it. And he's quite adamant. They're not trying to provoke. They're just trying to say, we need to have a discussion. And it's true, within Islam, Jesus is regarded as a prophet. Okay, so they're just making that statement. And I think the benefit of this is it allows Muslims and Christians and spectators to think about the differences between the faiths, and they are profoundly different, and yet work out that you can be friends, you can respect people who have profoundly different views, and that's what true tolerance is. It isn't the sort of unthinking acceptance of everyone's view, it is the ability to profoundly disagree and yet profoundly respect someone.
Well, you've had the ability to interview the person who put up the posters, but I wonder, Peter Collins, as someone who might drive past this or who maybe even travels in a bus which has got some of the posters on, does it offend you?
No, it doesn't offend me. I agree with John. I think that this is about triggering debate. It makes the point that Islam does actually recognise Jesus Christ as a prophet, which is a good starting point. I mean, to Christians, of course, Jesus Christ is much more than a prophet, and in no way, I think, should it be seen as an attack on the standing of Christ in Christianity. I don't think it was intended that way. So I think it's an opportunity to start a dialogue between two religious groups.
So why do you think the Christian leaders are getting quite upset about these posters?
Well, not many Christian leaders are. I mean, I saw the quotes too, and I know the people that were quoted, but mostly the response has been very positive. In fact, there was a group called Aussie Christians, and I know the people involved there too, who put up what you might call counter posters, but all they said is, "Dear Aussie Muslims, we're glad you want to talk about Jesus, let's chat," which is fantastic. That's exactly the approach. We don't agree on Jesus. Our views are diametrically opposed about who he actually was, but that doesn't mean we can't have friendly conversations. That's what a pluralistic society should be.
I think what this is pointing to is that in Australia, I think too much of public life takes Jesus Christ for granted. And I think that the point which would offend Christians is don't take us for granted. We are the majority denomination in Australia, and that looks like continuing for some time. And so I think there's a bit of catch-up being played here.
OK, well, let's move on. Happiness. The Dalai Lama has been in Australia this week promoting it, and next weekend, Compass, the ABC program, is running a story on an experiment in positive education. Let's first hear a little bit from that program.
These students are about to take part in a world-first experiment. Their school is introducing a controversial philosophy called positive education. It's a new approach to learning designed to help these teenagers develop ways of becoming happier, more resilient people. The school believes that it will improve their chances of dealing with life's challenges. But can these 14-year-olds learn optimism in the same way they learn reading, writing, and arithmetic?
OK, well, I won't do the slow motion kind of run towards you, Peter Collins, but can people learn optimism? Is it something that can be injected into the education system?
Well, they're not going to learn optimism if they spend all their time on Facebook and social media. So for that generation you've just shown, turn off your social media. Give yourself time to think and join up the dots. I think part of the problem today is, in a world which overall enjoys peace, and in a country where we have unprecedented prosperity, we've got so much going for us. Just stand back, enjoy it, think about it. We have so much to be happy about, and I think so many kids today spend so much time on social media.
But why do you think that is leading to unhappiness or dissatisfaction?
Because I think they don't get time to think. I think you really need time to reflect in life, and you need time to switch off.
But do young people reflect in that way?
No, they don't, and that's the problem. I think. If the unhappiness meter is on the increase, then I think it's because young people in particular aren't taking time out. I think probably for my generation, which is not the social media generation, you've had more time to reflect, to join up the dots, to enjoy what's there. So I really think the key lesson for Gen Y and beyond is take a bit of time out of your social media.
Well, John Dickson, I know you've got a Twitter account, but I don't think you're terribly active. Do you agree with Peter Collins that social media is perhaps a distraction and perhaps making young people unhappy?
I am more active on Twitter than you might imagine, and I love all of my Facebook friends. But I think the interesting thing about happiness is really, as soon as you pursue happiness, as a goal, I think it's elusive. Happiness is a byproduct. It's an accidental byproduct of other things.
But it's a real industry at the moment,
isn't it? It is a huge industry. But one of the happiness gurus from Harvard University, Dan Gilbert, professor of psychology at Harvard, he famously said that 90% of your happiness, your well-being, is bought with the first 10% of your wealth. In other words, really, to be basically happy, you just need food, shelter and clothing. And then for the next 10% of margin of happiness, you've got to keep spending more and more money just to get a little bit of a bump. And his basic point is that really what makes people happy, if that's the right word, have a sense of well-being, is family, friendships, relationships. And that happiness is the accidental byproduct of having good relationships in place.
What do you think of that, Peter Collins?
Yeah, look,
it sounds logical.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I don't think it's a question of how much money you have or end up with. You certainly need the basics. If you can't feed yourself and your children, and you don't have any sort of roof over your head, likelihood is you're going to be unhappy about that, not happy until you've found it. But once you've got those basics, I agree with John. I think good point. Happiness is largely a byproduct, but I do think you have to take time out. You have to switch off, however you want to call it. Some people, going back to our earlier conversation, for some people it'll be religious observance and meditation, but for many people it's a good start just to take time out to reflect. And
I want my kids also to have times of sadness. So one of my favourite lines in the Bible is, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And I want my children to know when it's right to be happy and to have fun, but I also want them to weep at some of the things in the world, and so there's a balance there. I don't want them to have this sort of numbing equilibrium.
And that they've got to constantly be happy. Well, a group of people who are not particularly happy at the moment are federal politicians, and particularly the leaders, and particularly the Labor leader, Julia Gillard. I was going to have a little bit of Kevin Rudd in there, but I think we'll just stick to Julia Gillard for the moment. The polls this morning are showing pretty low. She's not considered very impressive, let's be quite frank about that. Mm-hmm. Peter Collins, is this still due to the fact that she deposed Kevin Rudd, or is it to do with her, or is it to do with her policies?
It's a combination of policies, namely carbon tax and illegal immigration / boat people on the one hand, but secondly, in her first year as Prime Minister, she has failed to gain sufficient traction as Prime Minister. In other words, the electorate were prepared to accept, all right, we have our first female Prime Minister, and initially there was some bounce in that. All of that bounce is now completely dissipated to the point that Kevin Rudd is now more popular than Julia Gillard.
John Dickson, what do you think about what Peter Collins said? Is he right?
I'm a weird guy. I love all three leaders, and I include Kevin Rudd there too, just to be sure. I think they're all fantastic, and I do wonder whether Julia Gillard's polls this week are partly affected by those issues you said, but also the live export issue. I wonder whether there's some anger directed at the government just this week, and I wonder if in a couple of weeks you'll have the same poll.
But can I just quickly ask you both, I mean, with the live cattle exports, that was done so quickly. On carbon tax, we've got a multi-party committee that's going to take months. Is that one of the issues, do you think?
I wouldn't rate it, that particular issue highly. I think it's certainly, John, it's taken a lot of attention over the last couple of weeks, but I think the real dilemma, to cut to the chase, the real dilemma is what the Labor Party now does. Do they put Kevin Rudd back? Do they say we made a monumental mistake? And I think that's a very hard call for the Labor Party. I don't know that they can do that.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Fascinating discussion. Peter Collins, John Dickson, thank you so much for your time today.